Hello. So I want to talk today about taking breaks, specifically about taking breaks during the day. So this is one of the places where I love cycles and their fractal nature. So sometimes when I talk to people about how to get better at resting, how to get better at enjoying winters with less guilt, there's this assumption that we're going to talk about like the big winters, how do you take several days off? And that's really important. But there's something really powerful about the small breaks that we take throughout the day in two ways. Firstly, it's easier to practice with small breaks. Yeah, we're kind of like treating, like we're taking it in little bits, like trying a little bit of rest and then come back to work, trying a little bit of rest and then come back to work. So that's much easier to do than, particularly if you're somebody who's not used to taking a lot of rest, than suddenly taking, half a day off or an extra day off a week, for example. The other thing about taking small breaks during the day, because cycles are fractal, we get to kind of like experience these little bits of recuperation, these little bits of repotentizing throughout the day. And so that means that we are less likely to be exhausted at the end of the day, at the end of the week, at the end of the month, because we have been taking little opportunities to reboot throughout the day. So let's start with some of the signs that you need to take a break. Now, I think this can be really hard to notice. I know this is definitely true for me, particularly when I get kind of like heads into work, because like everything kind of narrows and I'm totally focused on what it is that I'm doing. And I have essentially kind of come up and out of my body, which makes kind of noticing how I feel much, much harder. But a few things to start to look out for. So noticing things in your physical body, noticing if you're starting to get tension in a particular place. Noticing if you're starting to get hungry or thirsty. Yeah, that can often be a sign that we're starting to kind of reach the end of this particular cycle. Perhaps you're starting to yawn more, you're starting to feel more tired. Yeah, something else I want to say about physical signs. No, I think that's, yeah, so kind of noticing some of the like physical signs in the body. Yeah, you might notice kind of like starting to get like a little bit of eye strain. Yeah, it might actually start to like hard to continue to focus on the screen. So those are some of the physical signs. Some of the emotional signs might be that you're starting to feel like a little more irritated, a little more anxious. Maybe you're starting to kind of like feel a little more overwhelmed by what you're doing. When you come back to the to-do list in the sense of like, oh God, more. Yeah. What else? Sorry, I keep going back to check my notes. Yeah, maybe you're feeling just the sense of like being a little bit more sensitive, like a little, like your skin is a little bit thinner. Yeah, it's a little harder to be with yourself as you're doing your work. You might even your motivation might start to fall off. You might start to feel stuck. Oh, I don't really know what to do next. Which can be really linked to some of kind of like more like the mental signs. That it can be your ability to focus physically, but also kind of mentally might start, might find yourself getting more distracted. You might be making more mistakes, or maybe you have a sense of like it's starting to be hard to remember details. You need to keep going back and like reread the same thing over and over again. What else? Yeah, a sense of, that it is taking you longer to get through what you're doing. Now, all of these signs kind of vary from person to person, depends on where you are in your other cycles, what it is that you're working on. And so, yeah, I really invite you to kind of like pay attention and like, what are some of the signs for you that it's time to take a break? And I think this is one of those times where it's really important not just to rely on you telling yourself that it's time to take a break. This is one of those times where having structure, where having discipline allows you to be more tender towards yourself. And so scheduling in small breaks throughout the day, around every hour to 2 hours kind of works for most people. This keeps us in line with our basic activity rest cycle, which is a cycle between 80 and 120 minutes, which is running throughout the day for us. This is what the REM sleep cycle is based on when we're sleeping. And when you've got these breaks scheduled in, even if it's just the opportunity to pause and to check in with yourself, like, actually, do I need to take a break right now? But what I find with a structure is it kind of encourages me to take a break before I need to. So often when I'm noticing the signs that I need to take a break, I've actually gone past my threshold. Yeah, I actually need to then take a longer break. Whereas if I take scheduled breaks, then I'm almost kind of, topping myself up in advance. So I like to use an app called Time Out on my MacBook, which is really helpful because I can set it up for a regular break. So I've only started to do every hour. It's a little bit more frequent than I think I need. What I like about it is that it means then I'm kind of ready to start afresh at the top of every hour. So for calls and things, it seems to work well for me. And so I try to take a 10-minute break every hour. I don't always do it. Sometimes I skip. And the other one I use, it also has this little feature where I can just take a 15-second pause, and it does that every 15 minutes. And that for me is an invitation to kind of like look away from the screen, look at something 20 feet away for 20 seconds every 20 minutes kind of thing comes to mind. So as I said, building in structure for your breaks, I think, is really important. So that you're not relying on you noticing that it's time for a break. You've got some structure to support you to say it's time to take a break. And then one of the really great things I like about Time Out is that I have to actively skip it. It like basically switches my screen off, so I can't do anything while the break is taking place. And you can set that up with like greater levels of discipline for yourself, depending on what you need. So signs for taking a break, structures to support you taking a break, and then what is it that you do in your break? And I think this really depends on what works for you. As a basic rule of thumb, I would always suggest some kind of movement. We're not really built to be sat down in one place for long periods of time. So it doesn't need to be a lot of movement, standing up, having a little bit of stretch, maybe a little bit of a shake. I know some people who really like to have like a little kitchen disco for 5 minutes, put a bit of music on and move your body. I like to make sure that I'm going to get a drink. Because one of the things I can do when I really get into it is I sort of forget to stay hydrated, and that's really bad for focus and productivity. So having a drink. I like to spend a little bit of time outside. Again, this kind of like depends what the weather is and what you have available to you. Even like a few minutes sat or stood outside, standing on the earth, I find can feel really nice from time to time. If you have a little bit longer, then maybe even a little power nap, 10 to 20 minutes to give yourself a little reset. And potentially like connecting with others. So this depends on like where you are in your working space. I do try to kind of like not look at screens too much when I'm on my break. So I know it can be really easy for me to get sucked into Instagram or whatever, and then actually I'm not really giving myself the chance to restore. But it can be nice to leave a voice note for a friend. If you're working in a co-working space or an office, then it's really nice if you can take a moment to say hi to somebody, nourish yourself socially, as well as physically or emotionally. But one of the things I would recommend, and this is something I learned from George Cow and his Joyful Productivity course, is to create a little ritual. Okay? So that you're kind of like doing the same thing each time. This is something I'm really practicing with myself at the moment, with varying degrees of success, I have to admit. but there's something about like taking the guesswork out of it. Okay, so rather than taking a break, you're like, oh, like what should I do? How should I spend 10 minutes? I'm starting to work on like what is the little ritual that I have, so that I can do the same thing every time, and yeah, not have to have like extra decisions that I need to make. So I'd really recommend like a quick break ritual for yourself. Like how do you recharge in 5 to 10 minutes? Doesn't need to be very long. One of the things I am finding is the more of these little breaks that I take through the day, as well as making sure that I then get a good 60 to 90 minutes off for lunch, really helps my focus and my productivity throughout the day. Really helps. I can like make the most of the afternoons where my energy can dip a little bit more. So I might work less time over the course of the day, but I feel like I get more done, and I don't have that same kind of like crash at the end of the day where I've been pushing and pushing and pushing myself until it's time to stop. So those are some thoughts for me today about the importance of taking a break throughout the day, taking several breaks throughout the day, some of the signs to watch out for, some of the ways you might use structure to support you in taking breaks, and then some ideas of some of the things that you can do in those break times that help you feel restored. So when you get back into work, you're ready to go, you're ready to focus for the next little sprint. If you've got any more ideas, anything else that you watch out for in yourself, please do share them below. It's really lovely to hear how different people experience this and different tools and ideas that people use. And if you decide to experiment with something, then please let me know how you're getting on. All right, I will see you next time. Thank you so much for being here.